Could the Toronto Maple Leafs actually become a player for the Jacob Chychrun sweepstakes and obtain the left shot defenseman? We'll discuss that possibility. Plus, we're also going to take a look at the comments made by Leafs coach Sheldon Keefe. We get news out of Detroit with Jacob Vrana being placed in a player assistance program. We have another waiver claim, a signing, and some more jerseys to talk about as well. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and a trade rumor I want to take a look at here today as well. First up, in case you missed it earlier, there is another dedicated video on the channel on the new reverse retro jerseys announced today by the NHL and Adidas. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but I just want to make sure that you're aware of the news. If you're somebody who likes collecting, or if you just like even getting ones for your favorite NHL team, there's a lot of really nice, cool jerseys in this new set of reverse retros announced here today. So there is, like I said, a dedicated video on the channel. I'll put it up on the YouTube cards going over all of the concepts for all 32 NHL teams. They all have one that's out there. There's certainly some really nice ones for sure. So go check out that video if you haven't already done so. Now, as I mentioned, we have a lot of other news to talk about today. First up, we have news from the NHL waiver wire. We have yet another waiver claim. The Colorado Avalanche have claimed forward Dryden Hunt off waivers, who was previously with the New York Rangers. So he, along with Phil DiGiuseppe of the Canucks, were placed on waivers yesterday. DiGiuseppe did end up clearing. Hunt was claimed. So, of course, the Avs just lost Lucas Sedlak on waivers to the Flyers the previous day. So they will grab another NHL contract here to kind of replace him. And then Hunt will go in there and see if he can't find and maintain a spot. So we'll see how that works out for them. We do have another player on waivers today, but this is unlikely to be claimed because this is unconditional waivers for the purpose of contract termination, which both the player and the team have already agreed to, and that's the Seattle Kraken and defenseman Michael Kempny. Kempny had been placed on waivers back on October the 10th, and he already cleared. That was for the purpose of being assigned. That was regular waivers. I assume that he didn't want to go down, or they decided that he might have other opportunities elsewhere that might be worth pursuing. So they're going to release him basically from his contract. So I'm not sure if he's heading back to Europe or what the deal will be, but certainly the time in Seattle and Michael Kempny is coming to a close. We do have another big milestone to look for tonight in several games of NHL action, but Wild defenseman Alex Goligoski will be appearing in game number 1,000. So that's certainly a big milestone that a lot of NHL veterans certainly zone in on as they get closer and deeper into their NHL careers. He will be the 10th player that's Minnesota born to reach this milestone, and the 4th defenseman to do so as well. So certainly want to congratulate Goligoski for a pretty solid, long career in the NHL. A fairly significant signing as well. The Calgary Flames have done another piece of good business here. Brad Treliving signs backup goaltender Danny Vladar to a 2-year contract extension valued at $2.2 million. So that's a bit of a raise over his current contract, and he's well worth it. He's proven to be an extremely reliable and steady backup to Jacob Markstrom. He's done a fantastic job since they picked him up from Boston a couple seasons back. And Vladar certainly earned it. I was kind of wondering what might happen with him. If you look around the NHL right now, and you look at some of the, who are might be maybe the top couple backup goalies that should be in line to become starters, or at least have an opportunity to do that, and even if they have to leave their existing teams, I would think he'd be right near the top of that list as being one of the most, like I said, solid backups from most recently here. So part of me is really happy for Calgary that they locked him up for a couple more years at a pretty reasonable rate. It's certainly going to increase what they're paying out in goaltending contracts with Markstrom signed long term. But like I said, he's well worth it, and it gives them that security knowing each night that no matter who's in the net, that they have a real solid goaltender. I know Daryl Sutter is a big fan of Vladar as well. Like I said, he's certainly earned himself the raise, and will eliminate the questions, I guess, on whether or not he might seek greener pastures, looking for more of an opportunity to be a starter here once his current contract would be expiring here soon at the end of the season. So good on Vladar and the Flames for getting that done ahead of time. Now, of course, we also got some other news. I'm not really sure how to describe it, but it's certainly concerning news, but we certainly hope everything will be okay. But Detroit Red Wings forward Jakub Vrana will be leaving the team. He's already gone from the Detroit Red Wings. He's going to be away for we don't know how long, in a definite period of time, and he's been placed in the NHL/NHLPA player assistance program. So, of course, due to privacy, there's no information released on what's going on with the player that requires him to be in that program. That covers a lot of different things, so there's no real point in speculating. It'll entirely be up to the player down the road if he wants to reveal anything that he was dealing with, which ended up causing that to take place or not. That's so for right now, we'll respect his privacy. I know we had got the news, I believe it was a couple days ago, that he was going to be away from the Red Wings due to personal reasons. That's all they said, which was fine. And then at the same time, I noticed some people online last night noticing that he was no longer listed on the Detroit Red Wings roster. I believe it was on NHL.com. So obviously they knew something was up. A lot of people thought maybe it's just a mistake. But now we know why, because he would be listed as a non-roster player while he's on that leave, taking care of whatever needs to be dealt with in the player assistance program. So certainly want to take a minute and just hope that everything works out okay for him. Hopefully this program is successful in helping him deal with whatever he's going through, and we certainly wish him the best moving forward. Now, a couple of items on the Maple Leafs. First up, I want to take a quick look and just comment quickly on the Sheldon Keefe comments. Of course, we saw after the Arizona Coyotes loss, Sheldon Keefe made some pretty, interesting comments that certainly got a lot of media attention. Some of it's a little bit overblown in my opinion, but certainly some of it's very much dissected and heavily discussed over the past 24 to 48 hours, really ever since. So one of the big things he said that got a lot of people talking was the fact that the difference, he said, between them and the Coyotes was that they had elite players. But those elite players did not play like elite players, and that didn't help them win, of course, and they ended up losing. So essentially, people are looking at this in multiple ways about the fact that it's a major diss to the Coyotes. And you know what? You can say what you want. I probably wouldn't have worded things that way. I probably just would have said that we have elite players and they didn't play like it. I don't think there was any point saying we have elite players and they don't. Not to say that it's not entirely true. We know the Arizona Coyotes on paper do not have a good roster. We know they're seriously looking to tank right now. That's not a secret. That's very much obvious by the work of GM Bill Armstrong and what he's done on the roster they've accumulated to put together on the ice here. But at the same time, they're all NHL players, so you know what? They're still good hockey players compared to your average person across the world, right? So at the end of the day, it just didn't really think it was necessary. But that's twice now this season that he's already kind of called out in the media his top players for not playing a very good game and resulting in the team to lose. Now, of course, he's already made additional comments, though, to kind of walk those comments back. We had heard comments yesterday from Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews being asked about, I guess, how, because it was reported that Keefe had a meeting with them, which again, I think was very much overblown. And a lot of this probably wouldn't even be discussed if it wasn't in Toronto, because it's such a, media heavy market. But at the same time, players and coaches, they meet all the time. They obviously sometimes have disagreements, and that's totally fine. It's totally okay. When you get a lot of passionate people trying to win, it's not always going to be pretty, and they could butt heads at times, and that's just bound to happen. That's not really a big deal. I don't think it's anything for anybody to be panicking about, upset about, or whatever. At the end of the day, though, Keefe kind of walks everything back and wanted to come out and talk to the media again, kind of just say that essentially, that he's talked to them and kind of, let them know what he meant, and that he essentially was kind of more managing the media more than the players, so to speak. But why he felt the need to clarify anything publicly, I really don't know. I don't really understand that. You made your comments. Your team didn't play well. Leave it at that. To me, I think it was totally justified. Now, there's different techniques as a coach that you're going to take in different, reactions, I guess, to different circumstances. Sometimes calling your players out publicly is, maybe the right way, but there's also times when maybe it's not the right way. And sometimes it's better to handle things privately behind closed doors, which we know they like to do as well. But certainly it's getting a ton of attention about, the Leafs maybe being mentally fragile, which I know is a term that Keefe himself used when those post-game comments as well, which I think he just gave the media too much to work with based on what he said. Sometimes you can say the right things and it just creates a frenzy because of your choice of words. Basically, I've seen some people online saying that basically Marner kind of went crying to Keefe and made him apologize and all this. I'm like, I think that's total garbage, and I don't really buy into that whatsoever. I don't really have no reason to think that actually happened. On this point, we know that he made those comments, he met with the players, and it probably was wise for him to do that. But like I said, he made it out to be, which I totally believe, that he was meeting with them regularly, because, you know, especially your leaders on their team, you talk to them frequently. And of course, during that conversation, he clarified his comments. But at the same time, I don't really think, I think a way bigger deal was made out of all that than it needed to be. We'll see how they respond tonight as they host the Dallas Stars, who have been off to a really solid start to their season. And I don't think it's really at this point for the Leafs and their fans. I think it's way too early to panic. I think it's way too early to do anything with any team in the league. Just let them work out the kinks, and hopefully these guys will get playing the way that they're capable of. Now, at the same time, we know they might be able to use some help on the blue line. We don't know the long-term status of Jake Muzzin at this point. We know there's other defensemen that are battling injuries. Liljegren's out for a while, and there's been conversations about could the Leafs be players for Jakob Chychrun out of Arizona. Now, of course, we know that Arizona and Chychrun are expected to get him in the lineup here probably within the next week to 10 days. Of course, he's still recovering from post last season's injuries, which he did require some off-season surgery. He didn't really participate in training camp, and he's kind of just getting ramped up to speed here now. So hopefully, like I said, in the next week or so, he can play. Until he plays and shows what he's capable of again, I'm not really sure. I don't think we're going to see a trade. I don't think anything will be imminent here for some time, as the price remains high, and teams, I think, need some reassurance that he's back, he's healthy, and ready to go. Now, I wouldn't have even thought about putting the Leafs into the conversation here because of the asking price of the team like Ottawa, who's a much younger team than Toronto. They have way more prospects still in their system because they're still going through that stage of their coming out of their rebuild. If they find the price is too high and don't want to pull the trigger on giving up a couple prospects and a couple high picks, then I wouldn't suspect the Leafs would. But Nick Kypreos, of course, we know, longtime member of the media, now former player. I know not everybody likes or respects Kypreos' opinions, and that's totally fine. The only reason we've been talking about this is that Kypreos presented, I think, what we can call a very interesting trade solution. And obviously, at the same time here, when it comes to Kypreos, sometimes with his rumors, you got to take them with a grain of salt because he hasn't been totally accurate at times. But this is more of just a concept more than a rumor, but he thinks the Leafs could do it, and here's how he feels that they could be a player without taking much off their roster, really air their top prospects. So ultimately, when it comes to the Senators, who've been the main team link to this player, they don't really want to part with players like Ridley Gregg, who is a former first-round pick that's really close to making the NHL, and Shane Pinto, who's in his rookie season, who was also a fairly high pick as well. Those are reportedly the players that the Coyotes were interested in, along with like at least one first-rounder and maybe something else, whether it be another prospect or maybe a second-rounder or something to that effect. But they don't want to pull the trigger on that. While the Leafs wouldn't want to ideally part with a top prospect like Matthew Knies. There was a lot of talk about him around the deadline last year. They, of course, never turned out to use him as a trade bait. And I'm not really convinced that they would want to here either. He's a player I think they really would like to have on their roster, whether it be at the end of this year or next year after he's done playing U.S. college hockey. But how this is presented from Kypreos is that they could offer 2 first-round picks, a player like Alex Kerfoot, who essentially would be there more for the money aspect. Not that the Leafs want to trade Kerfoot, but if they're going to bring in a roster player like that, some money's going to likely have to go out, because we're assuming at this point that Jake Muzzin isn't going to be done for the season. It sounds like he's going to be out for an extended time. At this point, we can't say he's not going to play again. No, like if we knew that, things would be different, and maybe they can go a different path here. But assuming that they need to have room available for Muzzin to be activated, we don't know about Matt Murray as well. That you have to kind of manage this with the expectation that they could be coming back. So Kerfoot would go out, which would be pretty close to the money leveling out. And then, of course, you'd have to throw in a younger defenseman, whether it be Liljegren or Sandin. One of those two guys might have to go in this kind of trade. But Chychrun's not overly old himself, so you're getting a player that's just a little bit older than them and more established and has a pretty good contract with some, even though he's got some injury history, he does have some good history as well, putting up numbers and being a good defenseman. So there's risk with this, but of course there's also potential high reward as well. So the Maple Leafs, according to Kypreos, could offer 2 first, Kerfoot, and one of those two young D. And that might be enough to make Arizona really think long and hard about pulling off this trade. So essentially they're getting 2 firsts and a fairly young roster player that's, an equivalent to a first. So that's like 3 young assets right there. And then a player in Kerfoot who they don't necessarily have to keep longer term. They could, I'm not sure what they would do there. He may not want to stay. I believe he's got a contract that's expiring anyway. So at the end of the day, that might not be a long-term piece there. It just helps them get through the rest of this year. So could the Leafs actually work that out and make it work? Should they work that out? We know they have lots of offense. Defense is usually the issue. If they're going to load up anywhere at the deadline, you can never have too many healthy defensemen. They already have a lot of injuries in that respect. It would make sense that might be the route they would take. I know Craig Button of TSN, I heard him say, and talking about this in the last day or so as well, that because he was asked about where he's seen Patrick Kane going, and even though the Leafs and Oilers and teams like that had been mentioned as potential suitors, he felt it didn't make sense for them, that they had way more than enough offense already, that they'll focus on adding defensive help before they'll do anything like that. And Chychrun could be a good solution for them, because, he's making a good amount of money. If he could play a top 4 role for them, he could actually be an advantage cap-wise. Like I said, he's still fairly young. Maybe he could actually fit there in Toronto after all, if they could actually get into the conversations here and create a deal that works for the Arizona Coyotes. So it does seem possible, but is it plausible? Is it likely? I'm not sure. Is he really the ideal fit, the player that they really need to go after right now? Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. Of course, if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.